So you've just got yourself a brand new Mini 3 drone, and perhaps you're a little bit apprehensive or nervous about taking your very first flight. My goal for this video is by the time you're done watching it that you'll be confident and comfortable enough to take your first flight. In this video we're going to cover things such as the hardware, the software, how everything works, and a couple tips along the way to help ensure a safe and successful first flight. My name is Sean and this is Air Photography. If you like this style of content, make sure you subscribe to my channel and don't forget to hit that bell icon. So flying your first drone can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot to learn and there can be some anxiety involved with it as well. But today's drones, especially the DJI Mini 3, is super easy to fly. So we're going to start out with the different packages and the hardware, because perhaps you're watching this, you haven't purchased it yet, but you're not quite sure which package to go with, because there are a few different options. Now with whatever package you get, you're going to get the drone with it, the Mini 3. It's the same in all the different packages that you purchase. Basically, the difference is going to be the controller and what accessories come with it. I think the most common package that people are going to buy is going to come with the DJI RC. This is the one with the built-in screen. It's a really nice controller and very convenient. You don't have to worry about mounting a smartphone. You don't have to worry about whether your phone is compatible. You can get up and deployed very quickly with it. The other option is to get it with the RCN1 controller. This is a really good controller as well. It's very comfortable to hold, has good range. However, with this one it's a little bit different because you do have to mount your smartphone and you will have to download the DJI Fly app in order to use it. And we are going to cover that here coming up in the video. No matter which controller you have, they're both great and you're going to enjoy it thoroughly. The nice thing is that you can always upgrade. If you started with the RCN1 and later on you decide you want one with a built-in screen, you can order this separately and easily bind it to the aircraft. Now as for accessories, depending on what package you choose, the base kit comes with extra propellers, some spares in case you damage one. It comes with a little screwdriver to change the propellers. It comes with a USB-C to USB-C charging cable. And if you get the RCN1, you'll get these extra cables, and that'll make the controller compatible with a wide variety of phones, whether you need Lightning or you need USB-C. Now they also have a package called the Fly More kit that comes with a few extra accessories. Most notably, it's going to come with a charging hub and 2 spare batteries, as you can see here. The charging hub makes it quick and easy to charge up all your batteries, and you're definitely going to want to get some spare batteries at some point. If not right away, you can purchase spare batteries in the charging hub later on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about batteries because there's a couple different options that you can choose. We'll cover that here in a minute. The other thing you get with the Fly More bundle or Fly More kit is you get a nice carrying case. It's pretty compact and small, so it doesn't take up a lot of room, and it basically holds everything you need. Now one thing you're going to notice that did not come with the kit, any of the kits, is a charger. DJI stopped including the charging bricks with their drones last year, so you will need to purchase one yourself. Now there's a good chance you may already have a compatible one laying around. You just want something that's fairly high wattage, but if you have a charger for a smartphone that's USB-C, chances are that will work with your Mini 3. You just use that USB-C cable that came with the kit. If you do need to purchase one, I highly recommend the Anker 65 watt. It has 2 USB-C ports on the front there, and it has a USB-A. It also features a fold-in plug. That keeps it nice and minimal, and it stores nicely in the case. And again, we're going to get into charging here in a second. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a look around the equipment here. Now one thing I do want to point out about the Mini 3 series is the weight. That can be very important to some people. The Mini 3 does come in at under 250 grams. So in many countries that means you don't have to register it and they're not as heavy regulated. Before you do fly it, just make sure you check all the regulations in your country, as every country has different rules. Now when you get your drone for the first time, it's going to be covered in a series of stickers, so you will have to remove them before your first flight. The drone features a fold-up design to keep it nice and compact when traveling and being stored away. To unfold it, do the front arms first, fold them down and out. Just do both sides. And then the back arms just fold straight out. At the back of the drone here, you can see we have a USB-C port. This is used for a couple different purposes. You can use it to charge the drone when the battery's inside, but it can also be used for transferring content and updating the firmware. Right beside that, we have a memory card slot. That's where you insert a memory card to store all the content you capture. And we'll take a closer look at that here in a second. Below that is our battery, and you can see there's a button on either side. To remove it, we just squeeze and pull out, and to reinsert it, we just push it in until we hear a click. When the drone's brand new, the battery will come pre-installed. At the top here is our power button, and a single press on it will show us how much power is left in the battery. It's also how we power on the drone, which I'll show you here in a minute. At the front here, we have a camera and gimbal protector. That just protects the gimbal and camera when it's being stored and you're traveling. The gimbals are a very delicate mechanism, so you do want to be careful with it. To remove it, we just pull up on that latch, and as you can see, it comes right off. Below that, we have our camera, a really nice 4K camera. One of the nice features is you can actually turn this camera vertical if you want to shoot vertical content for social media. We have a couple LED lights on the front arms here. And of course, we have our propellers. They already come pre-installed. These ones here are not quick release. Some drones you can just twist them off. These ones are held in by a screw, but they are fairly easy to replace. Now, before you will be able to power on your drone, you will have to activate the battery. The battery comes in a shipping state. It's basically like in a hibernation mode. So before you can power it on, you will need to activate it, and you activate it simply by plugging it into power. To power the drone on, all we do is do a double press, a short press, and then a long press. So short press, and then a long press. You're going to see the propellers twitch a little bit. You'll hear that startup sound. The gimbal will do a calibration. It might move around a little bit, and then it's ready to go. To power off your drone, you do the exact same thing. A quick press, and then a long press. So let's go ahead here and we'll take a look at the two different controllers. This one here is called the DJI RC, and as mentioned, it has a built-in screen. This is my preferred controller, just I like the convenience of having a built-in screen. If we take a look around it, we have our gimbals here. This is how we move the drone. We have a power button. We have our speed selector. We have Sin mode, normal mode, and sport mode. And we can just select it by moving that rocker back and forth. Beside that, we have a pause button, and also it's our return to home button. And we will take a look at that coming up here later in the video. Above that, we have some LED lights. Again, a single press will illuminate them to show us how much power is in the controller. At the bottom here, we have a USB-C port for charging. And again, we can also use that for updating firmware. Beside that, we have a door. You can see when we open it, again, we have another micro SD slot. And we have a second USB-C port. That second USB-C port is basically for some accessories. And you only need to really put a memory card in the controller if you're going to be doing screen recordings, like say you're making tutorials and you want to capture all your telemetry as well. If that's not something you plan on doing, you don't have to put a memory card in there. Beside that, you can see we have two screw holes. Again, that is for accessories. Most commonly, people use them to attach a neck lanyard. If we flip it over to the bottom, you can see we have a spot for the control sticks, as they are removable. That way, when you're packing it in the bag, you can just shove them in there, and that keeps them safely stowed away. Below that, we have two customizable buttons, and they can perform various tasks. And again, below that, we have two more smaller screw holes. Again, that is for an accessory. If we take a look at the very top here, this flat piece here is our antenna. So you always want to make sure you have that pointed generally in the direction of the drone when you're flying. We have a gimbal scroll wheel on this side. On this side here is for zooming. The Mini 3 does have a little bit of zoom, and that's how you can do it there. Over on this side, we have a record button for starting to record video. And on this side, we have a photo button. So to power on the controller, it's just like the drone. We do a double press, a short and then long press. So short and then long. It takes approximately 20 seconds to fully boot up. And you know it's ready to go when you get to the DJI Fly app page. Now, because with this controller, we're not mounting a smartphone, you will have to connect the controller to Wi-Fi. And you can do so by swiping down. This will bring up all our settings. We can go right into our settings there. Go into our network and internet, and you can connect to your home Wi-Fi there. It'll be important upon initial setup because there is some firmware that we need to download before we can fly for the first time, and we also have to activate the drone. So you want to make sure you connect it to your home Wi-Fi. When you're out flying, there is no need to have that connection. To power off the controller, again, we're going to do a double press, short press, and then long press. You'll hear that beep, and the controller will go ahead and power off. Now let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the RCN1 in case this is the controller you have with your drone. It's very similar, except as mentioned, it doesn't have the built-in screen. We do have a power button on the front there. Again, our mode selector, Sin mode, normal mode, and sport mode. We also have our pause and return to home button. LEDs at the bottom there. And again, you can press the button to see how much power is left in the controller. At the bottom here, we have USB-C for charging and updating firmware. These control sticks are removable as well, and they store right down there in the bottom. On this particular controller, this is our antenna here, and it pulls out, and that's also how we mount our smartphone. We have a gimbal scroll wheel on this side. Over here, we have our record and photo button. You'll notice there's not a zoom scroll wheel on this particular controller. That you have to do within the app. Now, if we pull out the antenna, you'll see there's a cable tucked down in behind there, if you can see that. We're going to pull this side out and unwind it, and that's how we connect it to our smartphone. By default, they come pre-installed with a lightning cable, but if you're going to be using something like an Android phone that has USB-C, you would just pull this cable out and replace it with the USB-C cable that came with the package. Mounting a smartphone is very easy. You just place it in there like that into the cradle. Just make sure you've already pulled out the data cable, and then you just go ahead and plug it in. As mentioned, if you're using this controller, you will need to download the DJI Fly app from an iOS device. You can do it from the App Store. If you're using Android, you do have to download it directly from the DJI website. To power it on, it's exactly the same. A single press and then a double press. So that's basically it. Those are the two controllers. So now at this point, let's go ahead and we'll talk about getting everything charged up and ready to go. It's important to make sure you fully charge your drone before you attempt to power it on the first time, just because when we go to connect it for the first time, there is going to be some firmware that needs to be downloaded and installed, and that can take up a significant amount of battery. As mentioned, all these batteries come in a hibernated state. As soon as you plug them in to charge them for the first time, that will activate them, and then they will start charging. Now there's a couple different ways in which we can charge batteries. We can charge the batteries directly in the drone, or if you have the Fly More kit, you can use the charging hub. So I'll show you both methods here quickly. As mentioned, you will need to buy a charger, and then it's as simple as plugging the USB-C into the back of the drone, and you'll notice these lights will start blinking. It can take anywhere from 45 minutes to a little over an hour, depending on how much charge is left in the battery. Alternatively, as mentioned, you can use the charging hub. Again, you can see we have a USB-C port in it. Just insert all your batteries. You don't have to have all three in there. You can have just one, two, or all three, and then go ahead and plug it in. Now, what you're going to notice happen here is you might see some lights bouncing around from battery to battery. And if it does do that, what it's doing there is trying to see what battery has the most amount of charge in it, because that's the battery it will charge first. It doesn't charge all three at the same time. It'll charge one battery at a time, starting with the battery that has the most charge in it. And the reason it does that is so that you can get out and flying quicker, because once one battery is charged, you can pull it out and the other two batteries will continue charging. Another interesting thing to note with this unit, you can see we have a button there, but we can also press on it, and as you can see there, it'll show us how much charge is in each battery. If a device you have on you is getting low in power, you can actually plug it into that USB-A port there, and essentially this is just a power bank. It pulls power from each battery. To charge up the controllers, no matter whether you're using the RCN1 or the DJI RC, we just plug the power USB-C cable into the bottom. And again, these lights at the top will start blinking. This controller is already fully charged, so it's not going to do that. So now that we've got everything charged up and ready to go, the next thing to do is insert some memory. And it's really important to make sure you use a nice fast memory card. Myself, I like SanDisk. I usually use their Extreme or their Extreme Pro. And for size, I usually recommend 128 gigabytes because 4K footage can eat up that space fairly quickly. Some of my drones, I also use a 256. So that boils all down to personal preference. So to insert the memory card, we're just going to take it and flip it upside down so the graphic is facing down. Just insert it into the back there, and then just push it in until it clicks. Now, before we get too far into things, I do want to go over some of the battery options for you before we continue. There's two different types of batteries you can purchase for your Mini 3. The battery that comes with the Mini 3, or if you purchase the Fly More kit, is the standard battery. And you'll know it's the standard battery because it has this stamp at the bottom. It says ultralight 249 grams. When this battery is installed in the drone, it will weigh under 250 grams. And it's rated for 38 minutes of flight time. The other battery option is this one here. This is called the Plus battery, and it is fully compatible with the Mini 3. It's the same shape and size. It does weigh more, as it is a higher capacity. With this particular battery, it gives it a rating of 51 minutes of flight time. The only really important thing to note, if you decide to use the Plus battery, the drone will no longer weigh 249 grams. So in some countries, that means you'll have to register it if you want to fly it. So you do have the option of what is most important to you, flight time or remaining under 250 grams. So at this point, we're all ready to power it on for the first time. As mentioned, you will need to download the Fly app if you're using the RCN1. Make sure you already have that downloaded and ready to go. The drone comes pre-bound to your controller when you get it, so you don't have to worry about doing that. They will just automatically connect to one another. However, when we first power it on, you will need to log in with your DJI account. If you don't have an account, there's an option there to create one. It's a very simple procedure. At that point, it will ask us to either update the firmware first, or it will prompt us to activate. So whichever one it prompts you to do first, just go ahead and do it. So let's go ahead here. We will power on. Single press and a long press, and then a single press and a long press of the drone. Now at this point, for me, it's just come to the main screen because I have already activated and updated my firmware. For you, for the first time, it will be asking you to install new firmware. You will get a message similar to this off on the left-hand side telling you there's firmware available, and a pop-up screen will come up on the screen asking you to activate the drone. Now, one really important thing to note, once you're activated and the firmware is updated, each one of these batteries sometimes has firmware that needs to be updated as well. These are considered intelligent flight batteries, so there is firmware that runs on them. And I left this here just so you could see it. For example, what will happen is when you put one of the new batteries in, you're going to get this message that says new battery request firmware update. That means the battery that I have installed there doesn't have the latest firmware. So you would update it just the same way. Now personally, what I like to do after I install firmware, as DJI does introduce new firmware on a regular basis, they fix problems, add new features. What I do once I've done the firmware update, I power the drone off, put one of the other batteries in, power the drone on, and that way if there's firmware, I can get it all done at the same time and not have to worry about it once I'm out in the field. So now that we're all updated, we've got the firmware updated, we've got the drone activated, let's go ahead here and we'll take a look at the Fly app. Now I'm going to be using the DJI RC. If you're using the RC-in-1 controller with your smartphone, you can still follow along as the Fly app is identical for both. Let's go ahead here. What we're going to do is hit Go Fly. That's what we would do when we're out in the field normally when we are ready to take a flight. So we'll press on Go Fly. That's going to put us into the camera view mode. Now I'm going to do a screen recording here in case I need to show you anything close up. But basically, let's take a look around the interface. It's actually pretty simple. DJI has done a really good job keeping things organized and not too cluttered. At the top right hand side, we have 3 dots. That brings us deeper into our settings where we can adjust things. I'm not going to go too much into detail, everything in there. I have done a walkthrough in the past, so I'll link that video in the description if that's something you want to take a closer look at. Beside that, we have our satellite count. Right now it's at 0 because we're indoors. Once we're outside, it will start automatically acquiring satellites. It's a good idea not to take off until you have at least 12 satellites. Satellites are very important because it allows you to know where the drone is at all times. It allows the drone to know where it took off from. So in the event of an emergency, low battery, or a disconnection, the drone will automatically come home to where it took off from. Beside that, it shows us our RC strength, what the connection strength is between the controller and the drone. And beside that, we have some battery information. Right now, everything is at 0 because we're not up in the air. Once you're up in the air, it'll give you all different information about how long before it automatically returns to home, how long before a forced landing, and how long before the battery is completely depleted. And beside that, we have a graphical representation. That means we have 47% left in the battery. Over here on the left-hand side, it gives us some information. At the top there, it shows us what mode we're in. You can see as I switch it back and forth, it'll go to sport mode, normal mode, and cine mode. Cine mode is basically nice slow flying. It really slows everything down, allows you to get some nice cinematic shots. Normal mode is basically like it sounds. It has normal mode, so you're moving at a normal amount of speed. If you want to go really fast, then you put it over into sport mode. Beside that, it gives us some information about our flight. Right now it's telling us to take off with caution because we have no GPS signal. That message will change as it acquires satellites. And we can actually click on that and it'll give us some safety information. First of all, it's telling us again to fly with caution because we don't have GPS. But here we can set our return to home altitude. By default, it's set at 100 meters. Basically, whether you manually trigger a return to home or a fail-safe return to home, the drone is going to climb to that altitude before it heads back. So it's a good idea to make sure you set that higher than any obstacle around. Usually leaving it at 100 meters for most areas is sufficient. Below that, we can also set how high we can fly. Usually 400 feet or 120 meters is the legal limit. And we can also set the distance. Right now it's set to no limit, but we could change that if we don't want to go farther than, say, 1,000 meters. We could set that accordingly. And right below that, it does give us some information about our SD card, and it gives us the option to format it. So if you want to clear everything easily from your card, if it's getting full, just hit the format button there. That'll clear it off. Just make sure you've already downloaded your content because that will delete everything. Now, if we go over to the very right-hand side, you can see we have our takeoff and land button. Now, right now it's in the takeoff position. You can see if I press that, we get this message on the screen. We have to actually press and hold that for it to take off. If we were up in the air and we're ready to land, that would change to a land button and you would just do the exact same procedure. The other thing too, when we are up in the air, that also becomes our return to home button. When we press that, it gives us the option to land in place or return to home. But as mentioned, you can also trigger a return to home just by pressing the button on the controller there. At the bottom left-hand side, we have our maps. We can click on that. and that's going to bring up some map information. We can click on it again. That'll make it bigger. To go back to the live view, we just tap on that area there. The other thing which a lot of people do is turn it to a compass. And we can do so by pressing that icon, the little triangle in the bottom right hand side. You can see it turns to a compass, and that can come in really useful. When the drone's out, it shows us which direction it's headed and where it is in relation to us. For the most part, when I fly, I leave it in the compass mode. You can also press that little arrow there. That'll minimize it. That allows you to see more of the screen. Right beside that is our telemetry. That shows us our altitude, our flight speed, how far we are. Over on the very left-hand side, we've got some information. It shows us how much storage is available on the memory card. It shows us our recording settings, our frame rate and resolution. And we can actually turn on some advanced controls there by pressing that little auto button. You can see we now have manual camera settings. So for a person who likes to set your own ISO, shutter speed, if you want to get a little bit creative, you can do so there. Now at the right hand side, at the very side there, you can see we've got a couple different options. Right in the middle, that big red button, that's our record button, but it's also our shutter button depending on what mode we're in. Below that we have a gallery button, a little play button there. That'll just bring up a gallery showing us some of the content we've captured if we want to preview it. At the very top there, that little film icon, that's signifying we are in video mode, but we can click on that, and as you can see, it brings up all the different shooting modes that we can switch to. We have photo mode, video mode, quick shots, and pano. Now I'm not going to get into every feature of the drone. I've made several videos already over the last couple months about the Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro. Definitely I would highly recommend watching them, and that'll familiarize yourself a little bit more with some of those features. But we can switch back and forth just by clicking on it. If you see, if I click on photo there, it's now in photo mode. Now beside that, at the very top, that's our button to turn the camera vertical. You can see when we click on that, the camera is now shooting in vertical. To go back, we just press it again. Below that, we have our zoom button. You can see we can go to 2 times and then back to 1 times. And right below that, we have our focus button. Myself, I always just leave it in automatic focus, but you can play with that if you want to do your own focusing. So that's basically it. As mentioned, you can stop and start recording by using the buttons at the top here. And as mentioned at the bottom, we have the C1 and C2 button, and they're already pre-programmed for a couple different functions. For example, if we hit the C2 button, you can see it'll put it back into vertical mode there, and we can go back by pressing it again. The C1 button just puts the gimbal straight down. If I press it there, you can see it goes straight down. If you want to get a nice down shot, pressing it again will move it back up. But we can also use the dial on the left-hand side. As you can see there, that'll slowly move the gimbal. If we turn it the other way, as you can see, it'll point straight up. And as mentioned, this is a zoom button. So instead of pressing the button on the screen, we can use that dial to zoom in and out. Now I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of the controls and how they work. These controllers by default are shipped in what's called mode 2. That's the most standard mode for flying drones. Basically, that's what the inputs are for each stick. You can change that in the settings, but I wouldn't mess around with that if you're not quite sure. Mode 2 seems to be the best choice for most people. So let's take a look at our right stick first. This has a couple different inputs that we can do. If we push forward, the drone is going to move forward. If we pull back, the drone will move backwards. If we push the control stick from side to side, the drone will move accordingly side to side. Now on the left stick here, if we push up, that's going to raise the drone, raise the altitude. If we pull the stick down, that's going to lower the altitude. If we move the stick side to side, that's going to yaw the drone, or basically spin it. So you can either spin it that way or spin it that way. And to get those really dynamic moves, you're going to end up using a combination of both sticks. That's how you can get some nice rotations and make the content look really interesting. Now, you're not going to have that on your first couple flights. It's going to take some time to get used to how the movements are. The only way to get good at that is just to fly as much as you can and practice. Pretty well it for the desk portion of this video. Let's go out now and we'll do a quick sample flight. I'll show you how to take off, how to land, how to use the return to home, and some other information that you may need to know. Okay, so we're going to go for a little bit of a test flight here. Now, I highly recommend for your very first flight, try and find an open field or a park where there's not a lot of obstacles or people around, just until you get a good feel of how the drone behaves and the movements. Now, when we go to launch the drone, there's actually 2 different ways in which we can do it. The first is using a series of stick commands on the controller. What we can do here is press down and in. You can see the drone starts up, The motors are spinning, but the drone doesn't take off. In order to take off, we push up on the left control stick. And as you can see, the drone is going to rise to about a meter, half a meter, and it'll just sit there and hover. And I forgot to mention there, it's also very important to make sure you have a good GPS lock. You can see up at the top right hand side there, I have 24 satellites. And it's also a good idea to check your map to make sure the home point has been set correctly. You can see that H there on the map. And you want to make sure of that just in case the drone battery gets too low or you accidentally get disconnected. The drone knows where to come home to. If you want to land manually, you would just hover above your landing pad or wherever you're going to land, and then just pull down on the left stick again, and that's going to put it back into the landing mode, as you can see there. So the other way to take off is by using the button on the screen, and that's this one here on the left hand side. If we press it, you can see we get this message on the screen. It says take off, and what we have to do is press it and hold it, and the drone's going to fire up, and this time it's going to automatically take off on its own. Again, hover about a meter. So now at this point, it's just a matter of flying around, practicing the movements. I would just keep it in cine mode to start, perhaps. That will keep it slow and in control, and just see how it behaves. Just do some laps, move around. Now when you're confident, you can take it up for a flight, but it's a good idea to really kind of take a look around the area, see what obstacles there are, buildings, tall trees, people. It's good to know that kind of information before you fly the drone. So let's go for a quick flight here, and then I'll show you how the return to home works. At any given time here, we can adjust our gimbal. We can point it down, or we can point it straight ahead. So I'm just going to get out a little ways here. So now, say you get lost up in the sky, or you just want to come home, and this will actually work too if the battery gets too low or if you get disconnected. The drone will automatically come home to you, but we can manually initiate it in two different ways. We can use the button on the controller there, or we can use the button on the screen. So I'll show you both here. If we hit the button on the screen, you can see now we have two options. Before that was our takeoff button, but it also gives us the option to land, and what will happen there, the drone will just land right where it is, or we can return to home. So let's go ahead and we'll push return to home. You can see the drone is spinning around now, and it's going to come back to the approximate location from where it took off from. I'm just going to turn the camera down so we can see it coming in. And you do have to be careful with this because there are no obstacle avoidance sensors on the DJI Mini 3, so it could potentially fly into an obstacle, or it could land on an obstacle. So it's always a good idea to keep a close eye on it, and you can cancel it at any time by hitting that red X on the screen or hitting the pause button on the controller. Now if we take a look down, the drone should be almost right above us. And there it is there. You can see my landing pad. At this point, the drone will now come down, and it'll attempt to land right where it took off from. But let's go ahead and we'll cancel that. Let's maybe head in this direction now. We'll do another return home, but this time using the controller. So that looks good there. So this time we're going to use the button on the controller. With this one, we just press and hold. You'll hear the controller start beeping. You'll notice here we didn't have to touch anything on the screen. We just press and hold it, and it will automatically come home. And again, we can stop it by pressing the button there again. So there we go there, we brought the drone back. Now at this point you just have to practice. You might have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nervousness your first flight or two, but that quickly goes away. So just get out there, fly, practice your maneuvers, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. Now if there's one tip I can give you, one piece of advice, something to make sure you always keep in mind, and that is let go of the sticks. If you happen to get too close to an obstacle, a tree, a sign, it's really important not to panic. Just let go of your sticks because the drone's just going to sit there and hover. That allows you to regain your composure, figure out which way the drone is pointed, get your orientation, and that way you can assess the situation and get the drone away from the obstacle. So if you ever run into any trouble, just let go of the sticks. The drone will stop where it is, and it will just sit there and hover because it is held in place by the GPS. So yeah, folks, that is my beginner's guide for the DJI Mini 3. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. Give it a thumbs up if you did. It's always greatly appreciated. If you're interested in the Mini 3 Pro, make sure you're subscribed to my channel, as I do upload a lot of different tutorials, tips, and tricks. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and we'll see you in the next one.